Paris
bread. Get your bread
1680s,
here.
the Sun King's golden transformation. Imagine walking through Paris in 1682 and witnessing something unprecedented.
Here,
A medieval city being
the
transformed into the most magnificent capital in Europe. Picture this. Just 20 years ago, this was still a cramped medieval city. Now, you're witnessing the birth of absolute royal power, made visible in stone, gold, and geometric perfection. Every street, every building, every garden, redesigned by one man's vision. Louis XIV, the Sun King. But the real revolution isn't what he built. It's how he completely reimagined what a city could be. In this video, we use cutting-edge AI tools to resurrect 1680s Paris, bringing period paintings, court portraits, and city plans to life from angles their original artists never could capture. We're not just observing this golden age, we're stepping into it, witnessing how the Sun King transformed a city into paradise on earth. Medieval Paris's final breath, 1660s. Before diving into the 1680s transformation, we need to see where Paris began. In the 1660s, Paris still retained much of its medieval character. Narrow, winding streets, timber houses, muddy roads, and foul odors. This city stretching along the Seine had yet to encounter Louis XIV's vision. The Louvre Palace still maintained its medieval fortress appearance. With its Gothic towers and dark courtyards, this structure stood in the city's heart as a symbol of old power, but far from the New Age's magnificence. Around Notre Dame Cathedral clustered houses, narrow streets and sewage channels that formed Paris's old face. Faubourg Saint-Germain wasn't yet the aristocratic center. Though the Marais district housed the wealthy, the city's overall appearance still resembled a medieval town. It was precisely at this point that young King Louis XIV's grand vision would begin. With Cardinal Mazarin's death in 1661, 23-year-old Louis XIV's personal rule commenced. His declaration, "L'état c'est moi," I am the state, marked not only the beginning of political transformation, but also architectural and urban revolution. Step into those final medieval streets of Paris, Rue Saint-Martin, stretching northward, still lined with timber-framed houses, whose upper floors jutted over narrow passages. The smell of livestock mixed with human waste, candle smoke, and the river's stagnant odors. This was the Paris that Louis XIV inherited, and the Paris he was about to obliterate. The Sun King's vision, absolute power's architectural language. Louis XIV's Paris transformation wasn't accidental. It was a carefully orchestrated propaganda operation. The king wanted to express his power not just through words, but through stone and marble. By the 1680s, this vision was manifesting itself in every corner of Paris. Versailles construction had begun in 1661, but the real transformation occurred in the 1670s and 1680s. While building Versailles, the king was simultaneously reshaping Paris, because the capital was his kingdom's showcase. It needed to impress every diplomat, artist, and visitor worldwide. Walk through the Louvre courtyard in 1680, where the old medieval castle once stood. Claude Perrault's magnificent colonnade now rose. These columns weren't merely architectural elements, they were symbols of royal power. Each column spelled out a letter in Louis XIV's authority. The Tuileries Palace and Gardens were also undergoing radical transformation during this period. André Lenotre's geometric gardens demonstrated that even nature could be bent to the king's will. Every tree, flower, and fountain was positioned with mathematical precision. But this was just the beginning. The real revolution was happening at street level, where medieval Paris was being systematically erased and replaced with something unprecedented in human history. Grand boulevards, the city's new backbone. One of Louis XIV's greatest gifts to Paris was the creation of grand boulevards. This project, begun in the 1670s and completed in the 1680s, changed the entire city's character. Picture the birth of the Champs-Élysées. This project, started in 1667, created a magnificent axis stretching from the Tuileries to the Étoile. This wasn't just a street, it was the physical manifestation of royal power. Wide, straight, glorious. Just like Louis XIV himself. Place Vendôme's construction began in the late 1680s. Jules Hardouin Mansart's design created this square surrounded by uniform architecture, a perfect geometric space. Every building the same height, same style, as if emerging from a single architect's hand. This symbolized royal authority standing above individualism. The foundations of great axes like Boulevard Saint-Germain and Boulevard Saint-Michel were also laid during this period. These boulevards, shattering the old medieval street system, were the first steps in transforming Paris into a modern capital. Strolled down these emerging boulevards in 1685, width and order dominated everything. Emerging from the Middle Ages' narrow, dark streets into bright, wide avenues wasn't just about transportation convenience, it was psychological transformation. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Walking these new streets meant experiencing royal power made tangible. Every step reinforced the message. This was a city worthy of the Sun King, a city that reflected his absolute authority over both nature and humanity. Invalides and Louis XIV's military legacy. The construction of Hôtel des Invalides reflected Louis XIV's military policy. This project, begun in 1670, wasn't just a hospital for wounded soldiers, it was a monument to the military dimension of royal power. Jules Hardouin Mansart's design for the Dôme des Invalides permanently altered Paris's skyline. This golden dome was visible from kilometers away, reminding visitors of France's military might. Walk through the Invalides courtyards in the 1680s. Wounded soldiers in uniforms strolled through gardens, undergoing rehabilitation work. This wasn't merely social service, it was a system reinforcing loyalty to the king. The magnificent decoration inside the domed church represented some of Baroque art's finest examples. Charles Lebrun's frescoes stretched across the ceiling, narrating Louis XIV's celestial authority. But the real power of Invalides lay in its message. Here was a king who cared for his soldiers, who honored military service, who understood that power required not just force, but also legitimacy. The Golden Dome became a beacon of royal benevolence and royal strength. Seine waterfront transformation. The city's new face. The transformation along the Seine during the 1680s provided the most striking examples of Paris's character change. Old wooden docks and irregular structures gave way to orderly quays and uniform buildings. With Pont-Neuf's completion, Seine crossings became easier. But the real change occurred along the riverbanks, where old fishermen's huts once stood. Aristocratic mansions now rose. Picture the development on Île Saint-Louis. By the 1680s, this island had become one of Paris's most exclusive neighborhoods. Magnificent mansions like Hôtel Lambert and Hôtel de Lauzun had completely transformed the island's character. Walking along Quai Malaquais offered the best way to witness New Paris's full glory. This walkway, running parallel to the Seine's flow, provided opportunities to observe both river traffic and the city's new architecture. The transformation wasn't just aesthetic, it was functional. New stone quays could handle increased international shipping. Improved drainage systems reduced flooding. Better lighting made evening navigation safer. Medieval Paris's practical problems were being solved through royal vision and modern engineering. Art and cultural explosion. Academy and salon culture. Louis XIV was transforming Paris not only architecturally, but culturally. In the 1680s, institutions like the Académie Française, Académie de Peinture, and Académie d'Architecture were making Paris Europe's cultural center. Picture the exhibitions in the Louvre's Salon Carré. Europe's greatest artists displayed their works here. Masters like Lebrun, Mignard, and Rigaud immortalized royal magnificence through Louis XIV's portraits. The establishment of the Comédie Française in 1680 made Paris the center of the theatrical world. Molière's comedies and Racine's tragedies enlivened the city's intellectual life. Opera development also accelerated during this period. Jean-Baptiste Lully's compositions harmonized royal praise with musical art. Opera performances at the Palais Royal became the center of aristocratic social life. But this cultural flowering wasn't spontaneous. It was carefully orchestrated by the crown, designed to reinforce royal authority through artistic excellence. Every painting, every play, every musical composition carried the message. Paris, under Louis XIV, represented civilization's highest achievement. Place des Victoires, Victory Square. Place des Victoires, completed in 1686, was the first square dedicated specifically to celebrating Louis XIV's military victories. Jules Hardouin-Mansart's circular design surrounded uniform buildings around a central space where a massive equestrian statue of Louis XIV rose. This square represented a revolutionary approach to city planning. For the first time, a square was created entirely to honor a single person. The surrounding buildings were designed to emphasize the central statue. Stand in Place des Victoires on a sunny morning in 1687. The gold-gilded statue gleams in sunlight, while surrounding uniform buildings create perfect geometry. This wasn't just a square, it was absolutist ideology carved into stone. The square's design influenced urban planning across Europe. Other monarchs would copy this model, creating their own victory squares, but none would match the original's perfect integration of architecture, sculpture, and royal propaganda. Walking around the square, visitors encountered a carefully orchestrated experience. Every angle offered a new view of the king's statue. Every building contributed to the overall effect. This was environmental design at its most sophisticated and most manipulative. Faubourg Saint-Germain, aristocracy's new heart. Aristocracy's new heart. In the 1680s, Faubourg Saint-Germain was becoming the new heart of Parisian aristocracy. Noble families, escaping the old city center's crowds, built magnificent mansions here. Mansions like Hôtel de Soubise, Hôtel de Rohan, and Hôtel de Salm Vapor ranked among this period's architectural masterpieces. Each mansion, with its own gardens, courtyards, and private architecture, resembled a small palace. Picture the social life of this new neighborhood. Salons where intellectuals, artists, and aristocrats gathered to discuss philosophy, literature, and politics. Influential women like Madame de Maintenon and Madame de Montespan reigned as queens of these salons. The architecture of these mansions reflected a new lifestyle. Large reception rooms for entertaining, private apartments for family life, service quarters for staff. These weren't just houses, they were stages for aristocratic performance. But this exclusive neighborhood also represented growing social division. While aristocrats enjoyed unprecedented luxury, ordinary Parisians struggled with rising taxes needed to fund royal projects. The Golden Age's splendor rested on increasingly unstable social foundations. Versailles' impact on Paris. Louis XIV's 1682 decision to move his court to Versailles paradoxically both emptied and enriched Paris. The court left Paris, but the city became more cosmopolitan. Versailles construction advanced Parisian crafts, ébéniste, tapissier, orfèvre. Thousands of masters working to create Versailles' magnificence simultaneously elevated Paris's artistic standards. But this also meant Paris needed to prove itself worthy of royal attention. The city focused on creating splendor capable of competing with Versailles. Every new building, every square, had to rival the royal palace's glory. The relationship between Paris and Versailles became symbiotic. Versailles needed Parisian craftsmanship, banking, and culture. Paris needed Versailles' prestige and patronage. Together, they created an artistic and cultural ecosystem unmatched in European history. This dynamic tension drove innovation. Parisian architects, artists, and craftsmen constantly strove to surpass their previous achievements, knowing they were competing not just with each other, but with the greatest royal palace in history. Commerce and economy. New Paris's engine. 1680s Paris wasn't just an artistic and architectural center. It was also an economic powerhouse. Seine ports served as crucial stops for European trade. Picture the expansion of Les Halles market. Products from across France reached Parisian tables. This wasn't just commerce, it demonstrated central authorities' power. Banking and finance sectors were also developing. Financial houses established around Place des Victoires and Palais Royal made Paris not just a political but an economic center. Luxury trades flourished as never before. Silk weavers, jewelers, furniture makers, perfumers, all found unprecedented demand from aristocratic clients competing to display their wealth and taste. The economic boom wasn't limited to luxury goods. Construction projects required massive quantities of stone, timber, metal, and glass. Transportation networks expanded to supply the capital's growing needs. Provincial economies increasingly oriented themselves around Parisian demand. Daily life, Golden Age people. Life for ordinary people walking 1680s Paris streets was also changing. Wider streets, cleaner water sources, more organized waste collection systems. Coffee houses were also arriving in Paris. When Café Procope opened in 1686, it launched new social life in the city. Intellectuals, artists and merchants met there, discussing European affairs. The fashion and luxury goods industry was exploding. Rue Saint-Honoré became luxury shopping center. Versailles dress codes influenced Parisian fashion, making the city Europe-style capital. Street life became more sophisticated. Professional entertainers, food vendors, craftsmen displaying their wares. The wider boulevards accommodated new forms of urban activity impossible in medieval streets. Even religious life was changing. New churches built in classical style, religious processions organized with baroque theatricality, and public ceremonies designed to reinforce royal authority through divine association. The city's new silhouette. Architectural revolution. Look at Paris's silhouette in the late 1680s. Invalides' golden dome, the Louvre's long colonnade, Tuileries gardens, the new Place des Victoires. Medieval Paris had completely disappeared. Baroque architecture's dominance in Paris forever changed the city's character. Classical proportions replaced Gothic lines, horizontal grandeur developed instead of vertical emphasis. The city's new harmony was carefully orchestrated. Building heights were regulated, architectural styles coordinated, public spaces designed to create visual unity. This wasn't accidental. It reflected royal authority, imposing order on urban chaos. Visiting foreign dignitaries consistently marveled at Paris's transformation. Venice's ambassadors, Vienna's envoys, London's diplomats, all reported back to their capitals about the French achievement. Paris was becoming the standard by which other European capitals measured themselves. Social transformation, new urban culture. By the mid-1680s, distinctly modern urban culture was emerging in Paris. Coffeehouse discussions, salon gatherings, opera performances, and boulevard promenades created new forms of social interaction. The concept of public space was evolving. Royal squares weren't just decorative, they were stages for civic life. Citizens could gather, socialize, and participate in urban culture in unprecedented ways. Women's roles were expanding within aristocratic circles. Salon hostesses wielded real intellectual and cultural influence. Fashion leaders set European trends. Literary patronesses supported artistic development. Education and literacy were spreading. More printing houses, more bookshops, more libraries. The expansion of bureaucracy created demand for educated administrators. Paris was becoming not just magnificent, but also intellectually sophisticated. International influence, Paris as model. By the 1680s, Paris was attracting international attention as a model for urban development. European monarchs studied French achievements, sending architects and planners to learn from Louis XIV's success. Russian envoys, German princes, Italian nobles, all came to study Parisian innovations. The city's influence spread across Europe, inspiring imitation and adaptation. But this influence carried political implications. French cultural dominance supported French political ambitions. A beautiful, sophisticated Paris enhanced French diplomatic prestige and cultural soft power. The export of French artistic styles, architectural techniques, and urban planning concepts created networks of influence extending far beyond France's political borders. Paris was becoming the heart of European civilization. The price of glory. Despite its magnificent achievements, the Golden Age carried enormous costs. Massive expenditures, taxes burdening the people's shoulders, increasing social inequality. The golden glitter of 1685 also contained seeds of the 1789 revolution. Walk through Paris in 1689, at the height of Louis XIV's reign. Every street corner displays magnificence, every building contains art, every avenue demonstrates power, but simultaneously behind this glorious facade, social tensions are growing. The splendor wasn't sustainable. Endless wars, massive building projects, and court extravagance were draining the kingdom's resources. The same system that created Paris's beauty was also creating the conditions for its eventual overthrow. Yet in 1685, these future problems seemed unimaginable. Paris appeared to have achieved perfection, a city where royal vision had triumphed over medieval chaos, where art and power had united to create something unprecedented in human history. Conclusion. Golden Age legacy and cost. By 1685, Paris had become the world's most glorious capital. Louis XIV's vision had been realized. The medieval town had transformed into absolute monarchy's crystal palace. Standing here, looking back at these moments, 1680's Paris wasn't just a city's transformation. It was simultaneously the crystallized form of the modern state concept, absolute power, and artistic patronage. The Paris that Louis XIV created wasn't just beautiful. It was a political statement carved in stone and gold. This statement would influence the rest of Europe, create the modern capital city concept, but also lay foundations for unsustainable excess. This Golden Age's story interweaves achievement and excess, beauty and brutality, vision and vanity. Paris 1680s was the perfect synthesis of all these elements. The phoenix that rose from medieval chaos didn't just survive, it soared higher than anyone thought possible. In its flight, it showed humanity what cities could become when power, art, and ambition united behind a single vision. But it also showed the dangers of that vision. When one man's dream becomes a city's reality, the results can be magnificent and terrifying. The same forces that created 1680's Paris's beauty would eventually create the conditions for revolution. The Sun King's Paris remains one of history's greatest urban achievements, but it also serves as a warning about the relationship between power, beauty, and justice. Sometimes the most magnificent cities rest on the most fragile foundations. If there's another golden age, another royal transformation, or another moment when power reshaped civilization, let me know in the comments. Let's continue exploring these pivotal moments when human ambition tried to create heaven on earth.